Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at the absolute rule breakers of the biological world. You know the central dogma, right?
Yeah.
It's practically the first thing they hammer into your head. DNA makes RNA, and RNA makes protein. It is supposed to be a one-way street.
It is a very strict one-way street until you meet the retroviruses.
Right. They just ignore the sign.
They look at that do not enter sign and, drive a semi-truck right through it in reverse.
Exactly. And that is where we are going today. We're doing a very specific deep dive into Chapter 28 of Lippincott Illustrated Reviews, Microbiology. Our whole mission here is to take this chapter, which can be pretty dense, let's be honest, and turn it into a last-minute lecture.
This is for anyone sweating an exam, really. Med students, college students. We're trying to decode the high-yield stuff so it actually sticks in your brain.
So we have a clear roadmap. We're going to start with the unique structure of the Retroviridae family. Then we will walk step by step through the replication cycle of HIV. That's the big one.
Definitely the highest yield part of the chapter. From there, we'll look at pathogenesis, how it goes from infection to AIDS, and then the pharmacology, how the drugs work.
And we'll finish with a quick look at the other retrovirus, HTLV.
Okay, so let's start with the name, Retroviridae. The key is retro.
Latin for backward.
Exactly. It all comes down to their superpower, this one enzyme, reverse transcriptase, RT. It's an RNA-dependent DNA polymerase, which in plain English means it reads RNA and writes it backward into DNA.
It reverses the flow of genetic information, breaks that central rule.
It does. Now, Lippincott divides this family into two main groups that are important for us.
The lentiviruses.
Right. Lente means slow. This group includes HIV-1 and HIV-2. They're called slow because the disease has such a long, slow onset.
And the other group?
That's the HTLV, BLV group, Human T-cell Lymphotropic Virus. And these are very different. HIV causes immunodeficiency. HTLV can cause cancer. It's oncogenic, but we'll get to that later.
Okay, let's focus on the star of the show, HIV. I want you to picture figure 28.2 from the textbook. If you could zoom in on one single virus particle, what would you see?
Well, first, it's an enveloped virus. It's basically a sphere wrapped in a membrane it stole from the last host cell it infected.
And that envelope is studded with spikes.
Crucial spikes. They're glycoproteins, and they look a bit like mushrooms.
A mushroom. Okay, break that down for me.
You have the stalk, which is called GP41. It anchors the whole thing in the viral envelope. And then on top of that stalk, you have the cap, the knob, that's GP120.
And GP120 is the part that makes first contact.
Exactly. Think of GP120 as the hand that grabs the doorknob, and GP41 is what actually forces the door open.
Got it. Now let's crack it open. Inside the envelope, there's the core, the capsid.
A cone-shaped capsid made of a protein called P24.
Okay, let's pause there. P24. That name comes up all the time on exams. Why is it so important clinically?
Because P24 is the major antigen we test for in early detection. Before the body has time to make antibodies, we can find this P24 protein floating in the blood. It closes that diagnostic window.
So P24 is the shell. What's the precious cargo inside?
This is where it gets really strange. The genome is diploid.
Diploid. You mean it has two copies?
Two identical copies of its positive sense, single-stranded RNA. It's like it brings a backup. Very unusual for a virus.
And it packs its own tools.
Right. It has to. It brings its own enzymes right there in the core, ready to go. Reverse transcriptase, integrase, and protease.
You can't rely on the host cell for those.
Nope. Human cells do not have a reverse transcriptase. If the virus didn't by its own, the whole process would be a non-starter.
Which brings us perfectly to the replication cycle. This is figure 28.8. If you're studying, this is the core mechanism. Every drug we have targets a step here.
Okay, step one is the heist, attachment and entry. The virus's little surface knob, GP120, is scanning for a very specific docking port.
And that docking port is the CD4 receptor.
Correct. Found on helper T cells, macrophages, dendritic cells, GP120 binds to CD4.
But that's not the whole story. It's not a single key.
No, it's more like two-factor authentication. Binding to CD4 is the first part, but to actually get in, it needs a coreceptor.
This is the whole CCR5 and CXCR4 thing.
Exactly, and it matters. Early on, the virus usually uses the CCR5 coreceptor, which you find on macrophages. We call that M-tropic.
Okay.
Later in the disease, the virus often mutates and switches its preference to CXCR4, which is on T cells. That shift to being T-tropic often signals a much faster decline for the patient.
So GP120 binds CD4, then the coreceptor. What happens to the stalk, GP41?
The harpoon fires. GP41 springs open, unfolds, and physically pulls the viral envelope and the cell membrane together until they fuse.
And the virus just dumps its contents inside.
It spills its guts, the P24 capsid with the RNA and enzymes, right into the cytoplasm.
Okay, step 2. Reverse transcription. The payload is in.
Now the star enzyme gets to work. Reverse transcriptase builds a DNA strand using the viral RNA as a template. Then it destroys the RNA and builds a second, complementary DNA strand. You end up with a double-stranded DNA copy of the virus.
But this enzyme has a huge flaw. It's sloppy.
It is unbelievably sloppy. It has no proofreading function. Our own DNA polymerase checks its work. RT does not. It makes mistakes constantly.
And that's actually the virus's greatest strength.
It is. It's the engine of evolution and drug resistance. Because of all those errors, it's constantly generating a swarm of slightly different viral mutants. So if you treat it with just one drug,
Chances are one of those mutants is already resistant.
by pure random chance, yes, and that's the one that survives and takes over.
Okay, so now we have this new viral DNA in the cytoplasm. Step 3.
Integration. The viral DNA travels to the nucleus, and the second enzyme, integrase, gets to work. It literally cuts open the host cell's DNA and pastes the viral DNA right into our own chromosome.
This is the point of no return.
Absolutely. Once it's integrated, we call it a provirus. It is now a permanent part of that cell's genetic code. It cannot be removed. Every time that cell divides, it will copy the virus's genes too.
The cell is officially hijacked.
Completely. Which is step 4, transcription. The cell's own machinery, its RNA polymerase II, just reads that provirus like it's any other human gene and starts making viral mRNA.
And that mRNA is used to make viral proteins.
Right. But they're made as these long, useless chains, these polyproteins. All the parts are stuck together like an uncut sheet of stamps.
Which brings us to the final step. Step 5, assembly and maturation.
The new viral components gather at the cell surface and start to bud off. But as it's budding, it's still immature. It's not infectious yet.
The last enzyme has to do its job.
Right. Inside that new particle, the third enzyme, protease, activates. It's a pair of molecular scissors. It starts snipping those long polyprotein chains into their individual functional parts. The P24 for the capsid, the RT enzyme, and so on.
And that is when it becomes a mature infectious virus.
Yes. And if you block that protease with a drug, the virus still buds off, but it's just a dud. It can't infect another cell.
Okay, that's the whole cycle. Let's zoom out to the patient now. Pathogenesis. Figure 28.12 in Lippincott shows that classic graph. Looks like a ski slope.
It does. It plots the CD4 cell count against the viral load over many years. It's the story of the war.
Phase 1 is acute infection, the first few weeks.
The virus just goes wild, an explosion of replication. The viral load in the blood skyrockets, and the patient feels it. They get what feels like the worst flu of their life. Fever, rash, sore throat, swollen lymph nodes.
But then it seems to get better.
Right. The immune system mounts a defense. It starts killing infected cells. Antibodies are made. We call that seroconversion. And the viral load is beaten back down to a more stable level.
This is the viral set point, and we enter phase 2, clinical latency.
Which can last for a decade. The patient feels completely fine. They're asymptomatic, but it's not really latent. Down in the lymph nodes, a furious battle is still raging. The virus is killing CD4 cells constantly, and the body is working overtime to produce new ones.
It's a war of attrition.
Exactly. And eventually, the body starts to lose. That's phase 3, progression to AIDS. The immune system is exhausted. The CD4 count starts to fall, and it doesn't recover.
And there's a specific number that defines AIDS for exams.
The magic number is 200. A CD4 count below 200 cells per microliter, or the appearance of a specific AIDS-defining illness, means the diagnosis is officially AIDS.
Which is the perfect lead into section 4. Opportunistic infections. Because HIV doesn't actually kill you.
No, it just takes away your armor. It lets everything else kill you. These are the infections that a healthy immune system would just laugh at.
Let's run through the classic ones.
Well, worldwide, the #1 killer of HIV patients is tuberculosis. Latent TB reactivates as the immune system collapses.
And what about fungal infection?
Pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia, or PCP, is a classic. A terrible pneumonia. Also Candida, or thrush. A thick white coating in the mouth and esophagus.
Then there are the cancers.
Specifically Kaposi sarcoma. It's caused by another virus, HHV8, but it really only takes off in the immunocompromised. You see these characteristic dark purple lesions on the skin.
And CMV.
Cytomegalovirus. For an AIDS patient, it can cause CMV retinitis. It attacks the retina and causes blindness.
It's a grim list. But this brings us to the modern era. Section 5. Diagnosis and treatment.
Thank goodness, yes. For diagnosis, we now use combination tests. They look for both the antibody and the P24 antigens.
So you can catch it much earlier.
Much earlier. Then you confirm it with a nucleic acid test to get the actual viral load.
And treatment. We already said one pill won't work because of that sloppy RT enzyme.
Exactly. You need HAART, HAART.
Highly Active Antiretroviral Therapy.
The cocktail, at least 3 drugs from 2 different classes,
Wow.
and they all just target the steps in the life cycle we talked about.
So you have the RT inhibitors.
NRTIs and NNRTIs. They jam the copier.
Integrase inhibitors.
They stop the virus from pasting its DNA into ours.
And protease inhibitors.
They stop the molecular scissors. The new viruses are made, but they're non-functional.
There are also entry inhibitors too.
Yep, they can block the CCR5 coreceptor or GP41 to stop fusion from happening in the first place.
We even have pre-P now.
Pre-exposure prophylaxis, taking a daily pill to prevent infection. It's incredibly effective. It loads your cells up with RT inhibitors, so if the virus gets in, it's stopped dead in its tracks.
HAART is a treatment, not a cure.
It is not a cure. It can make the virus undetectable in the blood. And undetectable equals untransmittable. U equals U. That's a huge deal. But that provirus, the DNA copy, is still sleeping in resting cells.
A latent reservoir.
Exactly. If you stop the drugs, it wakes up and comes roaring back. Treatment is for life.
Okay, one last topic before we recap. The forgotten cousin, HTLV.
Right. The Human T-cell Lymphotropic Virus. Also a retrovirus, but with a totally different strategy.
How so?
HIV kills T cells. HTLV does the opposite. It immortalizes them. It pushes them to replicate over and over.
Which leads to
Cancer, adult T-cell leukemia, or ATL, a deadly cancer of CD4 cells.
And there's a neurological disease too.
HMTSP, a nasty spinal cord disease that causes weakness and paralysis in the legs.
Is there a visual cue for HTLV on tests?
Yes. Look for flower cells on a blood smear. The nuclei of the leukemic cells are hyperlogulated, all twisted up like flower petals. You see that, you think HTLV.
And it's transmitted a bit differently.
It's very cell-associated. It's not transmitted easily as a free virus. It needs to pass an entire infected cell to a new person. So breastfeeding, sexual contact, blood, those are the main routes.
Wow, okay, that was a huge amount of information.
Yeah.
Let's do a lightning recap of Chapter 28. The absolute must-knows.
Okay, 1. Retroviruses mean RNA to DNA via reverse transcriptase. 2. HIV uses GP120 to bind CD4 and a coreceptor, either CCR5 or CXCR4. 3. It integrates into our DNA as a permanent provirus. 4. That sloppy RT enzyme means constant mutation and drug resistance. 5. The clinical course is acute, then latent, then AIDS, which is a CD4 count under 200. 6. Treatment must be a HAART cocktail of drugs. 7. Don't forget HTLV, the other retrovirus that causes leukemia. Look for flower cells.
Perfect. Now, before we sign off, leave us with that one final provocative thought.
Well, we always talk about fighting a virus, an external invader, but think about that provirus. Once HIV is integrated, its genes are physically part of your human chromosome. So treating HIV isn't really fighting a bug anymore. It's fighting a piece of your own cellular blueprint that's gone rogue. The real frontier for a cure isn't just about better drugs. It's about how you can edit your own genome to surgically remove this parasite without damaging the person. It's a whole different level of challenge.
A battle against ourselves. On that mind-bending note, we will leave you to your studies. Thanks for trusting the last-minute lecture team with your brain cells today.
Keep learning.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.